Welcome to KU Sports Extra. I'm Tom Keegan. He's Matt Tate. Matt, this just in, UConn basketball coach, women's basketball coach Gino Auriemma, believed to not be interested in replacing Bonnie Henriksen at KU. Can you believe it? He's going to be making about $10 million the next 3 years in UConn. Doesn't want to start from scratch.
But what about your column? I thought he was number one on the list.
It was my list.
Oh.
And any list has to start with Gino Auriemma. But then you go on to Lynette Woodard.
Not a bad name.
Then you go on to I think that the name that's a huge name, John Anchez of Hutch Community College, 33-0. Bonnie Henriksen fired on Monday. Fired. And I like the release, and I like Shane Zenger's quote, which was, we have higher expectations than this.
Right.
Said some nice things about Bonnie being good to work with. This is Kansas basketball. We have higher expectations. Right there, Shane Zenger has set the bar high for women's basketball.
Yeah, and that's the good news.
That's good news.
It is. That's the good news because there's new life. There's a new hope surrounding that program. And let's face it, they've been disappointing for quite a while. Put those 2 Sweet 16 runs away. Those were still disappointing years where they kind of even backed into the tournament. And
then there was some life because of Angel.
Yeah.
Things got cool.
But for a decade, the better part of a decade,
right.
It's been disappointment. And that's no longer the case. There is hope. There is a clear vision. And that vision is we expect to be in the top half of the Big 12. We expect to win games. And now the challenge is to go out and find a coach that can get them there. Much easier said than done. But I do get the feeling that there will be a lot of people interested from coast to coast, men, women, short, tall, anything you want to think. Everybody's going to be in play here. And
see, I like the way Zenger is framing it as Kansas basketball.
Right.
He's not saying Kansas women's basketball, and I'm cool with it just going on like it has been. No, he wants to make a big play here. There's a lot of revenue out there, potential revenue,
right.
that hasn't been tapped. You got to put people in the seats there, fill the four corners if things get outrageously good, like they're outrageously good at Hutchinson Community College.
And at UConn.
And at UConn. Or Lynette Woodard, who knows if she'd be interested or if she would be up to speed on how the game is coached. And
sure.
But she's an interesting name as well, and also test her interest to see if she'd like to be an assistant coach.
Yeah, I think that's the key with the former KU names, the KU ties. I mean, it's not so much do they love this place. It's not so much do they get what Kansas basketball is all about. Of course they do, but are they interested? Are they, up for the challenge? It's not an easy conference. You can't just come in here and coast through it and think that's going to be good enough. You've got to bring it. You've got to recruit. You've got to coach. You've got to market. You've got to do all those things to have a chance to even be in that top half. And I think it'll be a real interesting search. I think it'll be a real interesting hire. And, again, there's some hope. There's some excitement around that program for the first time in quite a while, really.
Right, for the first time since Angel Goodrich took him to the tournament. Before Angel's era, you got to go all the way back to Danielle McRae in the WNIT final,
right,
which they played in Allen Fieldhouse and lost to South Florida. But that was a great run, had a big crowd. So exciting to see these young women who work so hard at their games and our student athletes who cover both ends of it. It's like 2 full-time jobs. And to have them have those big crowds for those couple games was really cool to see them. They deserve that. Kansas basketball, women's basketball deserves to be on a higher level, and I think it's nothing but good news.
Definitely. What's the bad news?
The bad news is Brandon Green had an opportunity in a game that really didn't have any conference implications when they went to Norman. He could have put up 15, 20 shots. Who knows? Maybe like last week I said, maybe 30. But even if he puts up 10 shots, that's more than he's been putting up lately. He could have shot himself hot. Instead, he did whatever he did that earned him a 1-game suspension. That's just real disappointing. It's the 3rd suspension of Brandon Green's career, and here's a guy who could come out on fire in the Big 12 tournament or at any other point and kind of carry this team, but I just was so disappointed in him.
Yeah, no surprise. This is every time Brandon Green's been in trouble, it's been something like this. The word irresponsible comes up. The word, I don't know if bonehead has actually come up, but it's something like that.
I think it was knucklehead.
Yeah, knucklehead. There you go. It's just a weird deal. It's not like he's breaking rules or getting in trouble with the law or anything like that, but just not being locked in and not taking care of business. Self says that all the time. So taking it back just to that game, which you're right, it didn't have any implications in the Big 12 race or anything.
Telling that to the guys competing.
Yeah,
though,
right. And they did. They clearly showed that game meant something. But Sviatoslav Mihajlouk got 13 minutes in that game and took 3 shots. If Green had been in the lineup, in uniform, he probably would have played most of those 13 minutes. And, he's got more experience. He's a better, more, proven scorer at this point.
If Green had played in place of Mihajlouk or Selden, let's say they didn't want to rid Selden's ankle.
There you go.
Kansas wins that game.
Even if he just makes 1 or 2 shots, as it came down to. So not only did he, hurt his team's chances to win that game, but he definitely hurt his own chances to get right. And they need him right. I mean, this team needs everybody right now. And
he's a huge piece.
Yeah, not very many guys are right now. Selden's not right, and he's injured. Perry Ellis is injured. And Green's dealing with this. Cliff's out. I mean, there's all kinds of questions as this team heads into the Big 12 tournament. But that's what we're going to talk about next is the Big 12 tournament. And it's obviously one of the best times of the year. It's a great thing for Kansas City, especially when the weather's 70-plus degrees. I mean, I can't wait to get over there. We've been talking about it for 2-3 weeks now, and it's finally here. But, gosh, there's nothing better than good weather days over there. Outside the Sprint Center, the place will be packed. And inside this year, it'll be just as exciting as anything outside, probably more so. Let's go over
starting right off the bat, with the Baylor West Virginia game on Wednesday.
Sure. Well, Thursday. But, that's just one day
It's
off.
right before the Kansas game.
Right after Tuesday and right before Thursday.
Well, actually, it's after the Kansas game.
You're right. It's on Friday. No, I'm just kidding.
No, Kansas has the early game Thursday, though.
Yeah, there you go. Let's talk this tourney, though. We got a few things. Just threw these out, and we're going to see who we pick on these top categories for this year's Big 12 tournament. Simple. Who's your pick to win it?
I'm going to go Texas just because it means so much to Texas. They have so much on the line, and they really want to prove that the regular season was kind of a fluke or kind of a testament to just what a great basketball conference the Big 12 is this year. And they could do all of that. They have the talent. This is a super talented team. They could get hot at the right time and do some damage.
A 7 seed.
Yeah.
A team that played toe-to-toe with Kentucky is a 7 seed in this conference, and they're playing on the opening day.
Tells you all you need to know about this conference.
It's incredible. I'm going to go with Iowa State. I just think this team knows how to win this tournament. They've proven it in the past, and these guys are so experienced in this kind of venue. Plus, their fans travel as well as anybody.
To see.
Yeah, it's been
really
that way ever since this tournament was back at Kemper Arena. These guys have always shown up. The Cyclone fans have come in full force every time this event happens. And these guys, it doesn't matter who's in the uniform. They get fired up to play for those fans, and they really get a kick out of, especially when it's against Kansas or Kansas State, when their crowd is just as loud as the home crowd, or Missouri even back in the day. So I like Iowa State. How about your under-the-radar player who could have a huge impact for his team, maybe help his team make a little bit of a run? We're not talking first-team Big 12 guys. Obviously, those are going to be at the top. But a sort of under-the-radar guy.
Okay, and he will do it in an under-the-radar way.
Okay.
DeMarcus Holland of Texas is a lockdown defender. He's a guy who can hit the open shot, and he's one of those stat stuffers. He'll get steals, few rebounds, some assists, but mostly it's stuff that doesn't even show up. The guy he's guarding is going to have a bad day, and DeMarcus Holland is the most underrated player in the Big 12. And if I'm picking Texas to win it, why not pick DeMarcus Holland as my under the radar?
I like that logic. I'm going to stick with it. I'm not going to go with your guy, though, because I didn't pick Texas, although I like the pick a lot. I'm going to go with Naz Long from Iowa State. I think that guy is one of the best shooters, one of the most confident dudes on the planet, and I love watching him shoot. I think he gets hot in this tournament, knocks in a ton of shots from the outside, and helps carry Iowa State, which has a ton of pieces already. They're good enough to win, even if he's average. But if he's hot, they're a real tough out. So I like Naz Long. Let's go best potential game. You might have hinted at this already.
Yep.
Because it is a game. But
it's a guaranteed matchup. Is West Virginia and Baylor before the season started. I'm sitting there. Who do I pick for 6th?
Right.
Because I had Texas at the top of this.
Right.
Who do I pick for 6th? Is it Baylor or is it West Virginia? And I basically flipped a coin, and I think went with West Virginia.
Did you call it? Like heads or tails?
Yeah.
Okay.
I did.
What'd you call?
I called tails.
Never fails.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It does. I know. It's amazing. They say it's 50%. Nonsense.
No,
That coin is
tails
weighted.
never fails.
Yeah.
Gosh.
It's weighted coin.
Okay.
All coins are weighted. So I think that's an outstanding game because who's better? I mean, look at them. Yeah, Baylor won both head-to-heads, but then Baylor didn't do some things that West Virginia did. It's just a cool. They're two of the closest teams in the entire country.
No doubt.
Here they are going at it.
Well, it's a top 20 matchup in a quarterfinal.
Right.
Too. That's the best part about it. I think that's a fascinating game. I'm going to go with Oklahoma, Iowa State in the semifinal on the bottom half of that bracket. I think the two games those two played against each other were phenomenal games. Just intense, high energy, high drama. And then, of course, at Iowa State when Oklahoma's got the big lead and Isaiah Cousins starts taunting the Iowa State bench, and that brings back that Iowa State spark, and it gets that comeback rolling that ended up helping Kansas clinch the league.
Cuz, what were you thinking?
Yeah, what a remarkable moment that is. If these two lock up with a berth in the Big 12 title game on the line in Sprint Center,
I think you just trumped my pick.
Well, yours is a quarterfinal, though. You know, if we went round by round, you'd have me beat. Top 20? You can't beat that. That's awesome. So I'm going to go Iowa State, Oklahoma, and hope like heck that it happens. Okay, so bottom line, Kansas is the favorite to win this tournament. They're the top seed. They are favored in Vegas as the team most likely to win this. We all know what that means and what it doesn't mean. But let's say Perry Ellis can't play or isn't 100%. Who would be the favorite to win this tournament if Perry Ellis can't play?
I think Iowa State, for some of the reasons you mentioned. For one thing, their fans travel so well. It's as if Iowa State, as if Ames were as close to Kansas City as Manhattan and Lawrence.
Sure,
the way they travel. It's really impressive. And, you know, I mean, they did already beat Oklahoma in that dramatic game, so Oklahoma would be fired up coming back after them. But I just think Iowa State's maybe a little bit more complete team at this moment in time than that. Oklahoma.
Yeah, and they've got some experience. I'm not even going to argue with you. I think they're the favorite if Kansas isn't the favorite. I like Iowa State's team. They're a tough matchup. If they're hitting the three, which they do most games, they're tough to beat for anybody. Let's go with the last one then real quick, sizing up this year's Big 12 tournament. Who's the key player for Kansas to make a run in this thing? Obviously, again, Perry Ellis is an important part of their team, and so is Frank Mason. You know, I would imagine.
And so is Brandon Green.
There you go.
But you can count on Perry Ellis.
That's what I'm saying.
You can count on Frank Mason.
You know what they're going to give you.
Yeah. So who? I'm going to say Brandon Green would be an obvious pick, but I'm going to go away from that. He's definitely key. I'm going to say Hunter Mickelson because I think Hunter Mickelson is the one guy who, when guards get to the lane, he's the one who can make them stop and think.
Yeah.
Once you think, you're lost. He who hesitates is lost. He's that good a shot blocker, and he's that comfortable after basically not playing all year to come in and play pretty well.
The poise, the confidence, the just certainty he has in his game is really impressive, and maybe that's just his maturity. You know, he's not a young guy anymore. He was at Arkansas and played a little bit. He's been here a couple years now. It really is impressive though to see him operate with that kind of just, I'm fine, I can do this, no big deal. And that's a guy that hasn't played a ton of minutes at all.
Would yours be Brandon Green? Because that's a great choice.
I like it, but I'm going to go with Wayne Selden.
Yeah.
I think that if this team is going to at all be a contender for anything real, this guy has to figure out where his game went. And he's a great passer. He still plays plenty of minutes, and he's tough, and he's physical, and all those things. But he's got to knock down shots.
And do you make quick decisions on him? Are you at that point? Because I am. I'm at that point. If it looks like it's just not going to happen for him in a game, I go quickly to Brandon Green.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you kind of saw that at Oklahoma a little bit. They were down Perry Ellis, and he knew that, and he came out firing. And I thought that was a really good move. He missed a ton of shots early. He only shot 7 total. I think 5 or 6 of them came in the first 5 or 6 minutes of the game. I like to see the aggressive attitude. I like that he said, okay, Perry's out, I'm going to take over. I'm going to be the guy that scores for us. But he's got to knock those down if that's going to happen. And then he didn't play. Obviously, the ankle's an issue, but it probably won't be by the time the tournament rolls around.
Probably not.
And
how about in Waco when he had this horrible game? Then all of a sudden, for like a 90-second stretch, he was the best basketball player on the planet.
Took over.
I keep thinking that's going to happen. That whatever it was bugging him in Waco, and then it disappears and he becomes great. I keep thinking, well, this is the game that it all disappears. He's going to become great. But now I'm at the point If he doesn't show you anything early in the game, let's see what Brandon Green's got.
I think that's fair. The one thing I will say for Selden is you're not the only one that probably keeps thinking that. I'm sure he does. You know, he's another guy that, against all odds, maybe has remained pretty confident. It doesn't look like his confidence has ever wavered. He's just not productive. He's just not executing. He's not finishing, and they got to have him. That's the bottom line. I mean, if you know, Kelly Oubre has stepped up and become that third kind of behind Perry and Frank. He's become that third guy. But you know, Selden is the kind of guy that's played more than any of those guys, and other than Perry, obviously. And they just need him to find that form that he had at times last year, and certainly at times this year. So I think that's the guy that I would say is the most key. But I love the Mickelson pick too, because he could make a difference in a way that this team hasn't really had much.
Right, and I think that he's done well so far when he's been given the chance, relatively well.
Yeah. All right, Big 12 tournament is here. It's on, and it's time to go over and cover every ounce of it. We'll be there. Benton Smith will be there. Our photographers will be there, and so will that wonderful weather. Before we get out of here, let's talk obnoxious.
Who's Gary Bedore will be there as well in the Sprint Center, but he won't be here.
I'd like to say that I've accidentally forgot about Gary, but I've kind of moved on. You've moved on from Selden. I've moved on from Gary. I purposely left him out of that little dialogue there. I can't talk about the guy. I can't.
You know, he's had a lot of people envious.
I love the guy.
Through the years.
I love the guy, but if he's not going to want to be a part of this, and that's fine, to each his own. But if he's not, I've got to move on.
Well, I'm not ready to move on, but, you know, with all these awards he's getting, he's not getting it any easier to land for the show. That's all I'm going to say.
Okay, well, I'm glad you're still in his corner, because I love the guy. I'd love to see him on here. I'd love somebody to be able to make that happen. But let's talk obnoxious. Who's your most obnoxious man in sports this week?
Syracuse basketball coach Jim Boeheim. I grew up in Rochester, New York, a fan of Syracuse basketball when Roy Danforth was the coach and Rudy Hackett was the superstar, taking on the Ernie and Bernie show and beating that Tennessee team in the NCAA tournament. That's how far I go back with Syracuse basketball as a fan. Can't tell you how disappointed I am in Jim Boeheim's arrogance at being caught cheating. Just show a little remorse, even if it's fake, but he doesn't seem to have any remorse whatsoever, blows off the press conference, sends the coach in waiting, his assistant coach, Matt Hopkins, who comes there with his kids. That's the oldest trick in the book. How can you, I don't like Syracuse's reaction to being penalized by the NCAA. You can argue about the rules. Yeah, I don't like a lot of rules in the NCAA. But when you get nailed, at least act like it bothers you. At least shoo the fly. Jim Boeheim, the most obnoxious man in sports this week.
How many times you have to learn, too? Look at Roger Clemens. Look at A-Rod. I mean, those guys acted the same way. And
Richard Nixon.
Yeah, there you go. There's another one.
Although he was extra paranoid about everything.
Right.
Kind of the other direction.
Yeah, I like it. I think it's a good call, and it's a bad look.
And who's your most obnoxious
man? My most obnoxious man in sports this week is Philadelphia Eagles coach Chip Kelly. I just don't get it. And this has nothing to do with the Broncos. It really doesn't. I just don't get it. I don't get how you could have Nick Foles, LaShawn McCoy, Deshaun Jackson, Jeremy Maclin, and then within maybe a calendar year or a little over, they're all gone. Maybe he's got a plan that I don't understand. Probably he does, because I've never coached football, so that would Eagles fans
Thank
would certainly
God for
hope
the Broncos
yeah.
you've never coached football.
But it just doesn't make much sense. I don't see why you would tie your ship to Mark Sanchez. I don't see why you would get rid of LaShawn McCoy, a guy still in his prime. It just doesn't make any sense. And I don't think if he's trying to go any college direction, if he's trying to run a college offense, or if he's trying to run a college locker room, I don't think that's going to work in the NFL. It just doesn't make any sense to me. I'm sure Eagles fans are a lot more turned off by it than I am. I'm sure they have different words than obnoxious,
extreme.
Right?
They're extreme.
What are some words they might be using right now? Not obnoxious.
Ridiculous, but maybe something modifying ridiculous. Amateurish.
Just like something in front of each of those?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Like blue, amateurish.
Yeah, blue, amateurish, or
like some adjective.
Yellow, ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, good enough. That's all we've got. Lucky for you. Thanks for checking out this week's KU Sports Extra. It's tournament time. Win or go home from here on out. We'll be there every step of the way. KUsports.com, and we'll have more KU Extra next week. Talk to you guys then. Thanks for checking out this episode.